My name is Chelsea Tolner, CDC Program Director, and I will be moderating the webinar. This webinar is being provided as part of the Tourette Health and Education Program, a program of the Tourette Association of America in partnership with the CDC. During the webinar, we would be very happy to hear from you and include your voice in the conversation. You can ask questions or share comments using the question panel on the right side of your GoToWebinar player at any time. We will collect your questions and address them during the Q&A session at the end of Margie's presentation. Additionally, you'll note that we have a handout of the slides that you can download from your control panel and will be discussed in the presentation. I want to mention that funding for this webinar was made possible by our cooperative agreement with the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The views expressed by speakers and moderators do not necessarily reflect the official policies of the Department of Health and Human Services, nor does the mention of trade names, commercial practices, or organizations imply endorsement by the U.S. government. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our speaker this evening, Margery Henning. Margery Henning is a member of the TAA's Educational Advisory Board and has 25 years of experience as an occupational therapist. She believes that individuals with TS need to explore and understand the specific challenges related to TS and associated disorders, including sensory processing, OCD, and learning disabilities. Margie's goal is to provide individuals with TS the skills and assistive technology needed to play, learn, work, and socialize in the manner that reflects their interests and abilities. Before I introduce Margie, I do just want to let everyone know that we do not actually have the PowerPoint handout handy at this time, so you will just be following along to Margie's presentation, but we will make available the presentation at the end. When you receive an email, you'll be able to download it then. And without further ado, Margie, please go ahead with your presentation.
Hi, thank you. This is going to be a follow-up to the 15-minute YouTube video on surviving the holidays that we broadcast in December. So today's webinar will explain sensory processing in general and how it compounds TS and our comorbid symptoms. So this might look a little scary at first, but I wanted to really outline a little bit about what sensory processing is and give a pretty basic understanding of it. So it is the way that the brain organizes information from our senses and causes us to respond to the sensory input. So on the left side of your screen, you can see the 7 senses, and it's important that you know that in addition to the 5 that we're all very familiar with, smell, taste, touch, auditory and visual senses, we also have vestibular and proprioception, and those are the ones that can also create problems for people, and they're unseen as well, so people don't always understand what's happening. So to give you a little bit of information about proprioception, those are sensations that you receive from your muscles and your joints that tell you how quickly or how slowly you're moving a body part. So are you, swinging your arms? Are you moving your hand very slowly to place something very delicately? How much force or pressure you are exerting on an object or on a body part, and the sequence of your movements. So for an example, walking up or down the stairs, your leg and foot muscles and your hip muscles are sending messages to the brain on the position of each foot on the step, how much pressure is being placed on each foot, and whether you're pushing off or bearing weight on a foot, and you're shifting your weight from side to side. Some people don't get enough information when they are walking, and they walk with really heavy footsteps, trying to get more information to the brain about where their foot is, where their body is moving in space. And some people with tactile sensitivity may resist walking in their bare feet, and others can walk across stones without a reaction. So there's a combination there of the tactile or touch along with the proprioception. And then your vestibular system monitors the movements of your head, the position, direction, and speed that your head is actually moving. So imagine moving your head up, down, tipping it forward or backward, or diagonally, moving it side to side, or rotating around. So those are all vestibular input mechanisms. And your eyes and your ears also contribute to that vestibular information. Sometimes one or more of our sensory systems receive information inefficiently, and the intensity of the input is misinterpreted by the brain. So the message that the brain receives is that the input is unpleasant or painful or threatening, and it leads us to overreact. Or if the input is mild and vague, it causes us to underreact to situations. So on the screen, you'll see the input coming in. Your body gets the sensory input. The brain processes the information, and then it puts out information back to the body, and the body reacts to the information. And from that reaction, you then have another cycle of sensory input coming in and information going back to the brain. So you're making adjustments to whatever information is coming in. If you touch a hot stove, you're going to jerk your hand away, and the information is, yeah, now your hand hurts. So that's processing in a nutshell. Sensory processing issues, you can have difficulties with oversensitivity, where touch, movement, sights, sounds, tastes, and smell, and textures of foods are too much for you. And behaviors that you see are irritability or a withdrawal when people are touched, or they avoid certain textures of clothes or food. They show distractibility or are fearful in their reaction to ordinary movement activities. And a lot of these are found on the playground. You'll see children who are very hesitant to engage in activities on the playground, and it's almost like they're walking on eggshells, and then they get really, really upset if somebody bumps into them. But some of that is they're trying to keep themselves in balance and monitoring everything that's coming in, and then more input is off-putting to them, or it's just too much and they can't handle it. Underreaction to sensory stimulation, in contrast to an overly sensitive child, they seek out more intense sensory experiences. So you'll see these are the kids that are crashing into objects. They're twirling their body and spinning all the time. They also might be oblivious to pain or different positions that their bodies are in. And children can fluctuate between both of these extremes, overreactive and under-responding. And within our senses, they can overreact to one type of sensory input, say smells, and then overreact to other things. An activity level that's unusually high or too low. So they're either constantly on the move, or they're slow to get activated, and they're always kind of fatigued and logy. They're somebody used to refer to them as slugs. I mean, they're not slugs, but they're just slow moving, just can't get going, kind of like me in the morning. And they can fluctuate between that extreme also. And many times that's a problem for some people who have a little bit of knowledge about sensory processing issues. They think that putting a child on a therapy ball and bouncing them, or putting them on a trampoline and having them jump up and down, is going to get them into gear and ready to move and pay attention. But sometimes a little bit of stimulation goes a long way, and then the child has maxed out and you can't bring them back down again. So it's important that you monitor what you're doing with your child, and really work with the help of an occupational therapist to understand what they need, what parameters they need. You'll also see students with coordination problems, and those can be from gross motor to fine motor activities. So they might have poor balance, And if you imagine a child in school with poor balance, it's not just on the playground. It's walking up and down the steps on the bus, getting to their seat on the bus, moving in the hallway when other people are moving around them, sitting on their seat and knowing exactly where they are in their seat, where their body parts are in their seat, maintaining their balance, looking up at the board, looking back down at their desk. Where is their hand and their pencil? Where is the desktop? How much pressure are they putting on the paper? So there's an awful lot of things that go on with just a simple act of sitting in a desk and trying to get information and produce information. You'll see academic delays with these children because they have poor sensory integration. So they have a regular or above average intelligence, but they can't process all of the information that's coming in, so they don't respond appropriately and then put out the correct information. They also can display behaviors that are difficult to understand and organize. So these are children that might be impulsive or very distractible. And they show a lack of ability to plan an approach to a task, because think about a simple thing like climbing up well, it's not simple, but climbing a ladder. They have to plan how they're going to approach it, how they're going to take one foot off the ground, put one foot on the ladder, hold on with their hands, and produce a step pattern that's going to get them up the stairs and then get them back down the slide. So misperceptions of behaviors, because oftentimes these children have, I mean, obviously they have difficulties and they don't look like the rest of the children around them. And it's actually difficult for a child to recognize and explain to the adults around them why they're exhibiting some of these behaviors. So it will look like they're being manipulative or seeking attention, or they're just outright defiant because they're going to keep doing what they want to do, or they won't do what you're telling them to do. They look immature because they're always crying and being upset about something that happened when it, to everybody else, it's just really not a big deal. But to them, they have so many things going on in their system that they can't manage all of it at one time. They can look impulsive, and finally they can just get, explosive. So think about, to put it in, try to always put these sensory behaviors into context, or even to start to investigate, oh, could this be a sensory thing, because it just looks like the child's being a pain in the neck. But try to put it in your own terms. So if they don't want to wear clothing because it's too tight, think about something that you might, think about a belt that's too tight, okay? Or rings on your finger. Something it's just really aggravating for you. And conversely, some children don't like things that are too loose. It feels to them, they can feel the fabric moving, and it feels more like a bothersome hair tickling their skin, or a feather brushing up against them repeatedly. So if you've got that going on, it's hard to focus on the information you're supposed to be taking in. Also, think about if you were wearing a pair of shoes that were too tight and then you got a blister, you just keep compounding the pain. And or if you had a cinder in your shoe, you would take it off and make yourself feel better. But for these children, they have cinders in their shoes, so to speak, and you have to figure out, where that cinder is and what do you need to do to make them feel more comfortable. So the thing with children with sensory issues and TS and their comorbid symptoms, tics and OCD can really add to the excitement of sensory processing, because they develop situations, or they have a sensory need for things to feel just right, or it's got to be loud enough, hard enough, it's got to sound just right, it has to taste just right. Think about if you were eating fruits, usually, like if you are eating cherries or grapes or strawberries, sometimes you get one that it just doesn't, it wasn't sweet enough or juicy enough. And so you'll keep going back until you find that one cherry or grape or strawberry that tastes just right. It's just sweet enough. It's just juicy enough. It's not mushy. So for children that have that kind of a need, they're going to keep doing something until to them, it feels right or tastes right. I worked with a child who was afraid that if he said something and it didn't sound right to him, it might have been a word or a phrase, he would have to whisper it 3 times to erase it. And then he would say it again out loud and hope that it sounded right that time. Also, there's a girl who had a tic. She would jump, and she would jump so that her feet would hit her fanny, and her bottom was getting all black and blue, and it really bothered the dad to see his daughter, turning into black and blue. So one time when she jumped, he put a book between her feet and her bottom, and it worked. She didn't kick her bottom, but she told her dad, now I have to do it again because it didn't hurt enough. So we have to be aware of the fact that for our children that have sensory processing disorder and the tics and the OCD, there's going to be a lot more need for understanding what their sensory needs are. Another person she would trigger other tics by, if she reached into a silverware drawer and to get a spoon, and she touched anything else in the silverware drawer, then she would go into a list of behaviors that she had to do to negate that sensory input. So your children's behaviors may seem more strange than usual, but there might be a sensory component to it. So this next slide is going to be a little bit overwhelming for you, but I wanted to put it there actually to show you how involved this sensory processing is. And this is a model of an explanation of how sensory, how Winnie Dunn has developed her sensory profile, which is one of the evaluations I'll talk about briefly. But if you look at the column on the left-hand side, where in the gray, where it says neurological threshold continuum, you're looking at the threshold for sensory information coming in. So if you have a high threshold, you're easily habituated to whatever's coming in, and you need a lot more input to for it to actually get your attention and hit your radar. And then it works on a continuum, from high to low, so that if you have a low threshold, you're very sensitive to it, and a little bit of information goes a long way. And each one of our senses, including proprioception and vestibular, are analyzed in these sensory profiles. So you're looking at individual responses to each type of each of our senses. Across the top, you'll see the self-regulation behavior response. So it's the behavior that a child exhibits to control the sensory input, and it's either they'll have passive strategies or very active strategies. And the in the quadrants, you'll see, low registration, sensory seeking, sensory sensitivity, and sensation avoiding. So here, and you see the arrows. So the center part is what less people feel. Out here is what less people feel, and in the around the center is like the normal, the general population. So we look at it as being with low registration. It's the degree that a child misses sensory input. So if they're much more than others, their score, and that's how Winnie Dunn does the scoring on this. You either are, much more than others, or like most others, or less than others. So somebody that's much more than others misses a lot of sensory input at a higher rate than others. And it moves on that continuum. Sensation seeking is the degree that a child obtains the sensory input. So much more than others on that score would be seeking sensory input at a higher rate than others. And then the sensory sensitivity is how the child obtains the sensory input. So more than others, they're seeking sensory input at a higher rate, and then less than others would be they seek it at a much lower rate. And sensory avoiding is the degree that the child is bothered by the sensory input. So a much more than others score it means that the child moves away from sensory input more than their average peers. So these are the two, well, there's three that I have on here. The sensory integration and praxis test in the middle was developed by Jean Ayers, and that test is a very specific, detailed certification test. Individuals that offer sensory integration and practice test have to take extensive training and be certified to do this kind of testing. So not all occupational therapists are qualified to give that test. The sensory processing measure is a good evaluation, and there's a couple of different forms that go along with it, and it provides a complete picture of a child's sensory processing difficulties at school, at home, and in the community. It's for ages 5 to 12. It takes 15 to 20 minutes for you to complete the home form. And then there's a classroom form and then a school environment form. So you get a blending of information from different personnel, and our kids do react in different ways to different environments. So it's a nice way for us to assess how it all comes together. The other evaluation is the sensory profile by Winnie Dunn, and that goes from birth to age 14, and she has a variety or a selection of forms. One is the school companion, one is for the caregiver, and that gives you information on each of the sensory systems: auditory, visual, touch, movement, body position, and oral. It takes 10 to 15 minutes to complete it. And then it scores on attention, behavior, and social emotional. And then the sensory pattern, going back to that slide I showed you earlier, it shows if they're, what their registration level is, seeking, sensitivity, and avoiding patterns. And then it also goes into 4 school factors that look at a child's availability to learn. So, do they need external supports? Are they aware of the attention? Are they aware and attentive to what's coming in? Can they tolerate information within the learning environment? And are they available for learning? So it's good information to help an occupational therapist and the parents and the teachers come up with a good picture of what's going on with the child and then develop a plan. So, of course, after you do all this, then you're going to want to develop a sensory diet, and that's, kind of what we want to talk about. So, what is a sensory diet? It's an individualized program, and it really, with a child, what you're doing is looking at what it is the child wants to do, and what are they having difficulty doing. Why do they want to do it? Why are they having difficulty doing it? So it's having a dialogue, analyzing how the child is behaving and reacting. They don't like being this way. They don't like crying in front of their friends and being embarrassed. They don't like not being able to do the things that that their peers are doing, or their siblings or other family members. And it's frustrating. It impacts their perception of themselves and their self-confidence. So having that talk, we're going to do this because you would like to be able to do this, or you would like to feel better when we do that, and then we're going to check back a lot to see how this is working. So when I develop a plan, I always put it out there that we're trying this and it might not work. It might work a little bit. We might need to make some changes. But you're giving the child permission to try and know that it's not going to be perfect, and then have input into what would help make it better, so that the child is a big part of what's going to be happening to his or her body. So the individualized plan addresses the unique sensory processing needs of the child, and it's focused throughout the day. So from actually before you get them out of bed in the morning until after you get them into bed at night, you have a sensory diet that's going. It's controlled input across the day, and it enables the child to modulate responses to stimuli. And you're monitoring and labeling at first how the child is feeling and reacting. So you're giving them the words that they need to say, that's too much, that's uncomfortable, I don't like that. You can say, it looks like this is really bothering you. Would it help if we put on some headphones to cut down on the noise? Something like that. It's also a balanced routine of heavy work, deep pressure, and exercise throughout the day to enable relaxation and rest. And I think that's a piece that we miss a lot, because a lot of our children now, they don't have access to the kind of heavy work and play that some of us grew up with. And a lot of their lifestyle is more sedentary. They're sitting and, playing video games, playing on the computer, not running and climbing and playing and, doing those old playground games that we used to play, jumping rope and hopscotch. And so those are the things that we need to look at to decrease the level of anxiety that builds up in the body around incoming sensory input. And then we're always adjusting the diet as needed to account for changes in their daily activities. And we're trying to expose them to new or unusual experiences. So we're looking at what happened today, how did it work, what do we need to look at for tomorrow, and building on how they responded, and give them a repertoire to go back to when they encounter a new situation. Well, you know, I'm going to be uncomfortable with this, but I know that this worked the last time, so let me try that. I also think that you need to do some reconnaissance work when they're going into a situation that's new, so that you can look at it online, prepare a routine that they might be able to follow, and give them some tricks or activities or tools that they could use to get them through a new experience. And lastly, it's teaching your child how to monitor the anxiety and stress levels in their own body, and then take a proactive action to reduce their agitation. So what is it that's needed to be comfortable, alert, and appropriate for the demands of a situation? And that's what we want from, you know, all of our kids, and that's what we want in our life as well. So why do we need both of these slides are a little bit redundant, but I really wanted to stress why it's needed. So, you know, you go up front with the child that we're kind of exploring these options because I know that you're having trouble with this, and then let them feel safe in telling you what it is that bothers them, and don't minimize anything that they tell you. Think about if you had something that you really disliked and someone told you, oh no, I really like it, it's fine, that doesn't bother me at all. So it's like, you know, different tastes. People like certain things on their pizza, certain people don't like that on their pizza. Certain people like certain perfumes, other people don't like perfume at all. So it's don't ever minimize what your child is telling you as far as their preferences, and try to put it in terms that you would understand, as far as things that you don't like. So you create your daily routine that addresses the needs of the child, and you're doing it in a safe and controlled environment and input. So you're giving them tiny little bits. And what we're looking for is appropriate responses, so that you could, you know, let them have a little bit of an experience and then respond to that. And the thing about sensory diets is that we're going to address all of the sensory systems. So we're not going to just focus on one system, but we're going to try to create a balance in all of the systems, so that the things coming in that are comforting are used to kind of offset the things that are more anxiety producing. And, you know, we're teaching the child to know what they need, when they need it, and why they need it, so that they can advocate for themselves and be comfortable across all the environments. I worked with a group of college students who were in a program, and they wanted a sensory evaluation. It was a special program, and the program wanted a sensory evaluation on each of the college students. And when I did the sensory profile, many of the evaluations came back showing no real difficulties in many areas. But the reason the center wanted the evaluation was because they had a group of college-age students who had very specific likes and dislikes as far as foods, schedules, times that they did things, activities. So trying to plan a group dinner where the students would all be cooking and eating together was impossible. Even if they tried to plan an outing where they would all go to a show and then go to a restaurant, they could not pick a restaurant that all of the students could agree on, because they all had such specific food preferences. So when they filled out the sensory profile, they denied questions about, you know, sensitivities to foods, or uh, loud places or, you know, smells or things, but it's because they had designed their life around it so that they never experience those things. And that is exactly what we don't want to do with our kids. We don't want them cocooning themselves and you know, turning into adults that can't move out of their comfort zone. So that's why it's important to have a sensory diet. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the individual senses. And you cannot underestimate the power of smell. Uh, if a child says something, you know, smells, it really smells. And you know, you need to look at the things that you don't like and understand what it is that they're experiencing. So for a child, if you can find a scent that they do like, and use essential oils or spices or baking extracts, and place a little bit of that smell, that scent, on something that the child can keep with them, on a tissue, or put it on their shirt sleeve, or you know, on their arm or something like that, that they can smell throughout the day when they're encountering noxious odors or things that are bothersome. Or you know, the smells can also be calming. So teaching them to have something with them that they can smell that would calm them down is a very good plan. In a school life for a child, you know, the cafeteria is a horrible place for kids with sensitivities to smell, as well as the art room and sometimes the gym, the locker room. So you could also try things that just help them explore new senses. So you can get a bunch of scented things out. Some, you know, spices or flowers, and, you know, a cinnamon stick, a piece of lavender, rosemary, lemon peel, orange peel, apple, and let them smell and say whether they like it, they don't like it, and that'll help you start to determine. There was also a boy, if you look back to what, if we incorporate the tics and the OCD and the smell, this was a child who had a textured blanket, like a baby blanket, but he was in elementary school. But when he was at home, he would have to lick the blanket 3 times, and then he would have to tap it on his face 3 times. And then he would have to smell it 3 times, and then he would have to tap it on another surface 3 times. So you can see where, you know, smell and touch and OCD and rituals can wreak havoc for our kids. Touch is a touchy thing. Think about for yourself, and also with touch, our touch receptors also interpret pain, temperature, and pressure. So there's various things that go on with our touch receptors. Think about if you have if you're wearing gloves, what is your, how are you feeling something, picking up a dime or something like that if you're wearing a pair of gloves? You can't coordinate the feeling for that. If you cut your finger just a little bit, like a paper cut, and it doesn't bother you a whole lot until you go home to fix dinner and you spill a little bit of lemon juice on it, then you really know it's there. Think about the difference between being barefoot and wearing heavy boots. So for some children, they love to be barefoot. The more input they can get from their feet, the better. Other children, they won't put their feet on grass. They won't, they won't be barefoot to save themselves, and they won't put their whole foot on the floor. They walk on their tiptoes to avoid having to, get too much input. So for our kids, also, sometimes they're touching things because their visual system isn't giving them enough information about something, and they need to handle it and play with it in order to get more information about the object. What is the size of it? How does it feel? What is the structure? Students have really particular likes and dislikes as far as things that they have to touch throughout the day. Chalk, paper, pens and pencils. You see the kids that are chewing on pencils all the time. They could be chewing on straws, their clothing, their fingers. So with those things, there's a tactile and probably more of a proprioceptive piece for their job. But there's always that fiddling and movement, and then being sensitive to clothing or threads that are dragging on their skin, or tags, different fabrics. Some children can wear anything. Some children will absolutely not wear certain clothing, things that are too tight or too stretchy. If your child's having a hard time getting dressed in the morning, what you might try doing is get your routine for the evening and get them dressed before you put them to bed. And then that eliminates the fight in the morning, because all they have to do is get out of bed. The other trick you can try is they might not like getting out of bed because it's cold. So I had one parent put the child's clothes in the dryer for a few minutes to warm them up, and then it moved him along out of bed and getting dressed in the morning. And once you can get over that hump, you can kind of curtail it from there. But rather than having a painful morning, trying to get the kid out the door. You can also do that with blankets, where you could warm up the blanket before you put them to bed, and that will help them to settle down. They also might like a heavier weighted blanket. You could wrap them up, roll them up like a burrito. You can, when they get home from school, before they go to school, before they go to bed, you could make a cushion sandwich where you put them between two couch cushions, and you press on it to give a lot of deep, even pressure across their body, but keep their head out. If you have a therapy ball, you could try just slow rolling. They could lay on their tummy and just slow roll back and forth, or actually roll the therapy ball over them, and pretend you're like rolling out cookie dough or pizza. Giving them fidgets. There's a lot of fidgets now that are very appropriate, and don't look silly. You can find a lot online. You can provide Velcro on the inside edge of a desk if they need to just have that input. Think about the bath time. I know bath time is an issue for many parents, and it might be that either the bathroom is cold, or the bathtub is cold, or they don't like sitting on the tub. So do a mat, have them stand up and just, take a bath while they're standing. These are kids that are sometimes, they're either looking for a lot of input and they're crashing and banging and they're getting into everything, or they're like the princess and the pea. But brainstorming with your child about what hurts and what doesn't hurt will help. Tasting, you want to encourage them to take tiny tastes of new foods. Have regular meal times with your family where everybody sits down together and you're all eating the same things and tasting the same things. Have friends over for snacks to encourage new tastes. Prepare foods with your child so that they have some activity going on beforehand, seeing how the food is prepared, and give them choices kind of like, do you want to take a taste of a cooked carrot or a raw carrot? Or do you want to taste a pea or a carrot? And just one tiny taste is all that you need to encourage, and make it just like, a pinky finger dip, or, say you can have, if you have a balanced meal on the table, and they're getting adequate nutrition, but you'd like to broaden their horizons, you can say, I'll let you have more of that after you take one tiny taste of this. And I was at in a class once, and people were talking about picky eaters and getting kids to eat things, and I can understand the theory behind it, but the example was, if the child likes to eat apples, then you take an apple and you hide a little bit of another food in the apple to get them to eat it. But the example that was used was broccoli, hiding broccoli in an apple, and I could not tolerate that at all. And what would happen then is that, I could imagine the child never eating apples again. So you want to be careful about what you're trying to introduce, and why. So the visual, we're going to next. Things that affect our vision are flickering fluorescent lights, flashing lights. Kids will complain that it's too bright or too dark. Their peripheral vision senses movement, and it's stronger than others might be, so that it's almost painful when they see things, on the side of their head. They can get sick while they're moving in a car from the vision and the vestibular movement. You can actually, for reading, have a child lay on their back to read. They can sit in a study carrel, or build a little fort to close out, or a tent, or in a beanbag chair to kind of reduce some of the other stimuli that's coming in. You could also have them wear sunglasses or wear a baseball cap or a visor, and put a shade on the car window. Are all things you can do to help them. Auditory, it can be like, if you look at this picture, it's like nails on a chalkboard. So some of these little guys aren't bothered by the sound at all. Some people are thoroughly enjoying this. And then these two little guys in the forefront are putting their hands over their ears. So it's individual preferences for how much noise you can take in. And, some children can hear the hum of fluorescent lights. They can hear a faucet dripping. I had a student tell me that he had a hard time paying attention in class because the boy that sat next to him wore corduroy pants, and he didn't like the sound of the corduroy. So things that you can do are, have them wear headphones or earplugs, put on white noise. Also for auditory, a simple thing to do is give the child give them a simple direction, say it twice, and have them repeat it twice, and then draw a picture of what they need to do. That way, and it could be like, put on your shoes, and then the child says back, put on my shoes, and then they could draw a picture of their shoes. Then they've gotten the information several different ways, and they can go and do it. Proprioception is, we talked about, that's the feeling of, where you are in space. So imagine if you had Novocaine and you don't feel, your lip. By the time the Novocaine wears off, you've bitten your lip and your tongue several times, but at the time you're not feeling it. So our kids with proprioceptive problems, they either, like the kids in this bounce house, there's, the one little guy, he's having a great time, and the other little girl is, clinging to the wall for dear life because she's not comfortable with what's happening. But it's the ability to, jump off of a curb, jump into puddles, feel where your body is in space. providing a lot of playground activities for them, hopscotch, jump roping, hoppity hop, foot fidgets, or TheraBand on a chair to help a child sit still and focus. A weighted vest or a weighted blanket, and once again, the weight should be 10% of the child's body weight. Vestibular is the position of your head in space, and where your head is moving. So obviously, this little girl has no problems with her vestibular system. But for some people, you know, rides in the cars, amusement park rides, elevators, bicycles, balancing on a bicycle, pedaling, it takes in, you know, the balance, the proprioception, they're going to have problems. So trying to improve the vestibular system or provide vestibular input, you know, a rocking chair is a good thing, a rocker board, giving the child an underinflated camp pillow or beach ball, so that it's like a little bit of an inflated cushion that they can sit on the chair. They can wiggle around with it. And my rule is with children that you either, you know, it's either on the seat, you're sitting on it, or it's in my bag, it's put away, so that they don't start distracting themselves with it. And providing them other calming input while you're providing vestibular input, such as, you know, do some slow breathing, or wearing a weighted vest might be helpful. And probably the best thing you could do is introducing yoga activities for these kids. What we're looking for, what we want to create, is a child that can relax at night and go to sleep. And I can't say enough about getting rid of a lot of the electronics, really cutting down on how much overstimulation they're getting, and go toward more things that are relaxing for them, especially after dinner time. Children should not have any electronic screen time 3 hours before you want them asleep. So, you know, giving them audio books to listen to, or reading to them, or having them read to themselves, listening to music, white noise, providing deep pressure and relaxation, kind of massage, you know, rolling them out with the therapy ball, or using the cushion sandwiches, and incorporate breathing and relaxation into the evening routine. Would really help your child to, you know, relax. Some children need more secure pressure in bed, so giving them a weighted blanket. Or the other thing you can do is take a twin size sheet, put it crosswise across the bed, and tuck it into the mattress so that it is giving them even pressure across their body. So here's my thing. Our kids are under construction, and we have to figure out, you know, what we need to do to give them the foundation that they need to you know, build a stable lifestyle. And many parents, it's very easy for parents to say, my child has sensory processing disorder, and they leave it at that. And it's almost as if they can say that the child has sensory processing disorder, so it's an excuse for the way the child is behaving, and it's just how the life is going to be, and everybody around them has to accept them that way. You don't want a child that is upset and uncomfortable all the time, and gradually constricting their world. So you want to enable them to experience and explore and learn what they need, find out what works and find out what doesn't work, and then build on that. Here is some information that I've added this is a really excellent website. It's a short video on a child talking about sensory processing. The Easter Seals put it out. It gives you a really good idea of what's going on with the kids. And then there's numerous online resources for books and gadgets and things like that, that you just Google, you know, sensory toy, sensory processing information. You'll get more information than you need. These are a couple of really good books. Sensational Kids is by Lucy Jane Miller. She's also developed an evaluation, it's a functional test, which is also good. Too loud, too bright, too fast, too tight, that sums up many of our sensory kids. And Carol Stock-Kranowitz, The Out of Sync Child, is good. So that is that, and I'm done. Do we have any questions?
Yes, thank you so much, Margie. That was such wonderful information for everyone. We did have a question come in, and if anybody else has a question at this time, feel free to still enter it under the questions panel on the right-hand side on the webinar tab. So the question that we got is, how do you know how much sensory input a child or a student can handle? For example, one student says that loud noises bother him, but in turn, he also speaks in very loud tones.
Oh, right. Yep. That. So those are two different things, actually. So a child can be really bothered by very loud sounds. There's different frequencies of sounds. So think of yourself. Some people, hearing loss and things, people can hear certain tones and not others. But he can be, and if he says certain noises, certain sounds bother him, they do. Speaking in very loud tones is, that would have more to do with the modulation of his voice, and he's not aware of the fact that he's being that loud. One thing, depending on the age of the student, he could use what's called a toobaloo, T-O-O-B-A-L-O-O, I believe is the spelling of it. It's almost like a little, it looks like it's a little tube with, you know, an opening by the mouth and for the ear, and the sound is more directed into the ear, so it helps a child to modulate their voice. There's probably more information that a speech therapist could give you regarding that as well, but both of those things are legitimate. Yes, he's talking too loud and he needs to learn to modulate his voice. And an occupational therapist and a speech therapist could and should definitely, you know, help you figure out why that's going on. But being bothered by noises, that's legitimate too.
Great. All right, great. Thank you so much. That is the only question that we received at this time, but just so everyone knows, you know, here at the Tourette Association, we do have a full-time information and referral staff available to answer your questions. You can always email support@tourette.org. And if you have a little more time to think and kind of take in the information that Margie has shared with us and then come up with a question, feel free to reach out to that email address and we can make sure that you're connected to Margie. Actually, we did, I believe we might have just had question come in. Hold on one second. Okay, so we did get another question. Stimulants seem to increase my child with TS's sensory issues related to touch and noise, especially during school. Can you address what we can do to help her while she is on this medication? She's 11.
Oh boy. Okay, so the stimulant medications she's taking are increasing her sensitivity to touch and what was the other one?
To touch and to, sorry, they're just rolling in. So touch and noise.
Okay. So I would, and she's 11, so obviously giving her something that's going to kind of decrease the noise, and wearing headphones. And now younger, I mean, you know, students her age might be able to wear more, you know, earbud kind of headphones that would knock down the noise. And actually if she could listen to, if the school would allow her to listen to white noise on the headphones, or like music for concentration or calming, that might help. You know, and you could try it out, see what happens. Noise canceling headphones are great. And I guess the thing is, you know, you want your child to look normal, but at the same time, if putting a set of noise canceling headphones on the child to get through the school day and be able to process the needed information and not be upset or confused by you know, lack of information because they're so overwhelmed with too much noise. You have to weigh that out and work it out with your child. I mean, you know, maybe she'll go for it, maybe she won't. But if she can experience some calm without so much noise agitating her, she might be able to go for it. And the touch, I would find things that she likes. Make sure you're putting clothing on her that is very comfortable to her and soothing. Perhaps something in her pocket that is comfortable and soothing, you know, a piece of fleece or something that's comforting that she can just have in her pocket, or it could be on the back of her binder or inside her desk. Some sort of a weighted thing, and it could be a lap pad. You could take a you know, pillowcase and put some beans in it, make tubes out of it and put some beans or popcorn in it. And it can sit on her lap. That helps to calm down. Or something that'll lay across her shoulders. And if you look online, there's a lot of sensory wraps, and they're cute. And part of it is recognizing that this is, you know, the child has to recognize this is a problem for me. Yeah, it looks a little different, but a lot of the kids like to have and experiment with those things. So hopefully that will help.
All right, great. No, I think that's probably very helpful. We have 2 more questions, so I'm just going to read them off to you. And then anything that we receive after that, I'll keep an eye. If we get anything else in the next minute or two, we'll respond to those. But otherwise, I will just collect them and we'll get the responses from you off air.
Okay, great.
All right. So the next question is, sorry, I'm just scrolling back up. Is it possible that a setting may bother someone one day and not another? For example, the cafeteria bothers a student one day, but not another day.
Oh, yeah. And of course, you know, with Tourette kids, you know, inconsistency is the word of the day. So it depends on what else is happening that day. And especially if you're talking about the cafeteria, it can be the lunch of the day. That smell is really bothering the child, or the noise level, or it could be either an activity that happened one day before cafeteria, perhaps phys ed, and another day it might have been math class. So based on the sensory input that the child is getting before they go to the cafeteria, and then the change in the sensory information in the cafeteria, how many other things are impacting his day can very definitely impact his behavior. But that's where you start exploring with the child. You know, this really bothered you today. What do you think it was? And then start, you know, charting. Is it only on Wednesdays? Is it, you know, is it after this? Is it when they serve this? Is it something else that's going to go on during the day? So you can help the child try to figure out what it was. It could also be some kind of social emotional thing where, you know, kids are pushing and shoving, or somebody says they don't, you know, they don't like you today, or they won't let you sit with them. So explore all of those things, and have the child come up with some actions that might be helpful.
All right, thank you very much. And then our last question. My son is 23. Is it too late to work on this with him? He has basically cocooned himself in his room.
Oh, yeah. So I would definitely see if you could. Winnie Dunn has a sensory profile for adults, and I would recommend that you do that first of all. Have a sensory profile done with him, and you can definitely work with him if you can get an occupational therapist, familiar with adults, and I would say mental health issues as well, because he's probably got a lot of anxiety now. And so you've got to go slow, but exposing him a little bit at a time, and letting him feel safe and in control, you can definitely get him. I would definitely try it. You don't want him in his room when he's 40, I guess.
All right, great. And then do you mind just one more question that actually
Not at all. No, not at all.
Great. So let's see. So how much does defiance and manipulation play a role? This is something that is occurring.
Well, it can look like defiance and manipulation, but I don't think that it is, because I guess what you need to look at is what are they being defiant or manipulative about, and put it in your own terms, as far as if somebody told you to jump off a bridge, you wouldn't do it. And is that the level of anxiety that whatever it is you want the child to do is producing? If it's, eating certain foods, or, brushing their teeth, or there's some other things going on that are creating enough anxiety that the child can't do it. And so talking to the child about that, finding out what is it that is really making you unable to do this, and how can we get around this? And is it important? Is it something that's important, or do you need to compromise? So go at it that way, I would say. I hope that helps.
All right, great. And then just a quick follow-up. Someone just asked, what did you say the name of the person was who has a sensory profile for an adult?
Winnie Dunn, and
Winnie
it's called
Dunn.
Winnie Dunn, WINNIEDUNN. I refer to her, it's on the slides here, which you can get access to later, but it's called the sensory profile for adults.
Okay, all right,
And
great.
any occupational therapist will know that right away.
Okay, wonderful. And we did have quite a few people write in saying thank you for all of the great information too. So
I hope it was helpful. Okay.
Oh, thank you, Margie. And everyone, just to wrap it up, this is all that we have, all the time that we have tonight. But once you leave the webinar, just know that you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would greatly appreciate it if you wouldn't mind completing that and providing your feedback for us to improve our future webinars. You will also receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. And we will be posting the webinar on our Tourette Association YouTube channel as well for anyone who was unable to participate today. We do encourage you to reach out to us at any time through our Information Referral Center or on social media about any ideas and suggestions that you have for future webinars and things that you'd like to learn about. And on behalf of the Tourette Association, thank you again for joining us and for taking the time to view our presentation. And thank you to Margie. Have a great night.